Welcome to EWTN News Nightly. I'm Colleen Carroll Campbell. Tonight's top stories. The government shutdown continues. We'll talk with Republican Congressman Jeff Fortenberry about the partisan standoff and what's at stake. And shutdown or not, the new Obamacare insurance exchanges are now open. We'll hear from a health policy analyst about what they are and how they work. And Pope Francis wraps up day 2 of his Reform Summit. We'll bring you the latest from Rome and talk about the Pope's vision for change. Thank you for joining us. It's day 2 of a federal government shutdown. A number of programs and services have been suspended, and about 800,000 government employees are temporarily out of work. This because Congress couldn't agree on a budget before Monday's midnight deadline. In the center of the partisan standoff is the Affordable Care Act, commonly known as Obamacare. Republicans want to block parts of the president's signature health care law, but Democrats refuse to touch it. Here to give us his perspective on all of this is Republican Jeff Fortenberry, a Catholic congressman from Nebraska. Welcome, Congressman.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here with you, Colleen.
Great to have you on again after having you on in Rome. Let's start with the shutdown. You've spoken out against this. Earlier, you had said that you were not in favor of using efforts to defund Obamacare, and you even at one point called them theatrics. Now things have shifted and we're in the midst of a shutdown. What's your take on that?
Let me give you the full context of those comments. My goal has always been, let's keep the government running, but also try to stop the harmful effects of the new health care law, which is harmful to many, many Americans. I mean, the president has already delayed the big business mandate, the employer mandate. It's not fair that he wouldn't delay other parts of it. That's been an argument we've been trying to make. Now, I didn't think it was right simply to shut down the government over Obamacare itself, but we've tried to get in a negotiating posture with the Senate and with the president to actually reduce the harmful effects of this law, starting with trying to defund all of it, delaying it, and now simply delaying the individual mandate, which forces people into these exchanges, maybe against their will. But in order for us to be able to fix it, I believe in the right type of health care reform, one that's going to actually reduce costs and improve health care outcomes and protect vulnerable persons. But what we're seeing is a huge shift of cost to unsustainable government spending and a real erosion of health care liberties, and those are serious problems. So we're in a difficult moment, to be frank with you. Not many people want to see this government shut down, but you have to use moments to try to leverage better outcomes for the American people.
Let's talk a little bit about the Health Care Conscience Rights Act. You're a co-sponsor of this, and this specifically addresses the issue that is on the minds of so many Catholics and definitely the U.S. bishops, which is the fact that these services, contraception, sterilization, and drugs that can in some circumstances induce abortion are considered basic preventative services that have to be covered, and that individuals and religious employers have to go ahead and provide insurance that covers that. That's been a huge issue for the bishops, huge issue for many Catholics. You tried with this bill to address that. It was in the House's spending bill, and then it got yanked out at the last minute.
Yes.
The bishops are worried it's not going to get back in. What's your sense?
They should be worried. Again, this is one of those components of the health care law that is most seriously un-American. This is an assault by the government on a basic fundamental right that is found in the First Amendment, the freedom to practice your religion and faith, the rights of conscience. The government should be protecting people's ethical sensibilities, not giving them a dilemma as to whether they're going to coerce them into buying drugs or procedures that they may not agree with, particularly abortion-producing drugs. And so we were part of the initial effort several years back before the preventative services mandate actually came out, because we were very worried that the health care bill was ripe for this type of manipulation, if you will. So the whole issue of conscience rights and religious freedom in health care was a well-established government precedent, cultural precedent, until the new health care law. We respected one another's differences. Now the Department of Health and Human Services is making people of faith, religious organizations, organizations affiliated with the Catholic Church, to pay for drugs and procedures that are in clear violation of long-held reasoned beliefs. It's not saying that it's taking somebody else's choice away for if they want to do that, but it's forcing people who, again, have a deeply held reasoned belief that would violate their ethical sensibilities to pay for these things. And we simply think that's a violation of long-held legal precedent, the First Amendment, and maybe more fundamentally this philosophical proposition that the right of conscience, that's a sacred space.
I got it. I just want to make sure we don't get out of time here, because we're almost out of time. What do we do then to get this bill in, if that is indeed the solution to the mandate problem?
Well,
from the bishop's perspective, it is.
Yes.
But you said maybe it won't make it back in?
Well, we were very heartened just a few days ago that the last offer from the House of Representatives to keep the government running also included a provision that would protect religious freedom and people who have moral objections to the preventive services mandate, as well as basically participating in the act of abortion through an insurance exchange. So that was very heartening that, at least in the House of Representatives, this concept, this issue,
But it got stripped out at the last minute.
It got stripped out. Again, we can only do so much. We presented that to the Senate as an option. If we could keep the government running, give us that and some other things, and they rejected that.
Do you think it'll make it back in?
I'm worried. And what we have to do, all persons of goodwill, and this is not simply a Catholic issue, it's other faiths see this very big problem, and people of goodwill who may not even have a faith recognize that the government shouldn't coerce people into violating a fundamental right. It should be actually protecting those rights. We should be celebrating religious organizations and charities and other people who are providing health care for their employees in small business, for instance, who've done the right thing, but now we're willing to fine them or even run them out of business if they're not willing to pay for something that, again, violates their religious freedom or deeply held belief, this sacred space of the rights of conscience.
Congressman Fortenberry, thanks for joining me.
Pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
Despite the shutdown over Obamacare, a major part of the health care law launched this week. Online insurance exchanges are now open across the country. Already, there have been a number of technical glitches and delays, but more problematic for the exchanges may be the fact that most people don't understand how they work. According to an ABC News Washington Post poll, 62% of Americans say they need more information to help them understand the health care law. Here to tell us more about the insurance exchanges is Dr. Mary Patterson. She's a professor at the Catholic University of America who specializes in health services and policy analysis. Welcome, Dr. Patterson.
Thank you.
Well, this is a complicated law in many ways, so let's break it down to the basics. What exactly is a health insurance exchange, and how is it supposed to work?
Well, if you think about a marketplace, think about a number of vendors, each with their own stall selling a product. That's what a health insurance exchange is. The only difference in a marketplace and a health insurance exchange is that all the vendors in a health insurance exchange are selling the same product. Okay. And the government has helped us out with that product by making sure that before they come to the exchange to sell their product, the product meets certain basic standards for sale, so that people can trust that a vendor in the health insurance exchange has been reviewed by the exchange, and the exchange is sure that what's being offered meets their basic requirements.
And who's eligible then to buy insurance off these exchanges?
People who need it. In other words, those who are uninsured, who haven't been able to afford insurance, whose employers don't offer insurance. People who need health insurance should think about the exchange as their first stop.
Okay, and now these are supposed to be more affordable insurance on these exchanges. How is that supposed to work?
Well, the reason they're more affordable is because they're being offered to more people. And they're enticing or hoping that healthy people who only need preventive care, who need services to help them stay healthy, will buy the insurance. When they do that, they increase the number of people that are contributing to the insurance pool, and that means that when you're sick, other people are contributing to help you pay the bills.
Okay. Now, some states have set up their own exchanges, but others have defaulted to the federal government on this. Can you explain the distinction there?
Sure. The federal government did not require states to set up their own exchanges. 22 states felt that they were able to do and did set up exchanges. But those that felt they couldn't, for various reasons, either they lacked the expertise, some small rural states felt that they just didn't have the capacity, the federal government stepped up and said, well, we'll manage the exchange for you. And so those states don't look any different, really, than the states that have state-run exchanges. You just go to a different place.
Okay, now the exchanges opened yesterday. What are the other important deadlines coming up with this law?
There's 3 months for people to sign up for coverage. In fact, they can sign up for coverage until March 31st of next year. At that point, it will close, and you can't sign up until open season happens again. Now, if you have a major life event, a birth, a death, a divorce, a separation, then you can sign up for coverage. Otherwise, you have to wait. So the major dates are coverage starting January 1st, 2014, the open season closing March 31st, 2014, and open season opening again October 1, 2014.
Okay, Dr. Patterson, thanks for the information.
You're so welcome.
For many Catholics concerned about conscience protection, the most important question about the new exchanges is not simply how do they work, but what services do they cover? All insurance plans on the exchanges will include what the Affordable Care Act calls preventative services. These include contraception, sterilization, and drugs that can, in some circumstances, induce abortions. And for anyone currently uninsured who chooses not to buy health insurance because it includes these services, there will be a tax penalty. That goes into effect next year. On the exchanges, abortion procedures are treated differently than contraceptive services. In most states, individuals can opt to purchase abortion coverage or not when they choose a plan through the new exchanges. In 23 states, however, state laws do not allow coverage for elective abortions to be offered through the insurance exchanges. In Rome today, Pope Francis continued his much-anticipated meeting with the so-called Gang of Eight. That name refers to the 8 cardinals selected from around the world who are advising Francis on his reform plans for the Vatican Curia and the worldwide church. The meeting began yesterday and continues through tomorrow. Our Rome correspondent, Alan Holdren, has more. Alan, what's the latest from today's meeting?
Well, the reform process is underway here, Colleen. Though these meetings are taking place behind closed doors, we got an idea of what's going on at a briefing at the Holy See Press Office this afternoon. There were some initial introductory remarks from the Pope. Then they began speaking about the foundation for the discussions, which is in the continuation of the reform that was begun in the Second Vatican Council. So they began to speak about different ways to enliven and refresh the Church and its mission. And this could take place through the greater collegiality between bishops and the Pope, greater lay involvement, a church of the poor and for the poor. And from there they began to speak about a reorganization of Vatican departments. Concretely, they spoke about the Synod of Bishops, which is the department that assembles bishops and experts every 2 to 3 years to speak about an issue of import to the worldwide church. They've spoken about the Bible, they've spoken about the church in Africa in years past. Last year, they spoke about the re-evangelization of traditionally Christian countries that are suffering from secularism. Now, the Pope wants to make this process more efficient and effective. He wants to do the same with the Vatican, which is notorious for its bureaucracy. And in an interview that was published this week in Italy's La Repubblica newspaper, he spoke about how the traditional court was a leprosy to the papacy, and that the Roman Curia is Vatican-centric, even today. And he said that this neglects the rest of the church, and he's going to do everything he can to change it.
Has there been any talk of a timeline for these changes he wants to make?
Well, they're very slow to talk about the speed of the process here, if that works. They're talking about a long timeline, no conclusions to be made this week in particular. Father Lombardi at the Vatican Press Office said it very well when he said the greatest decision that will take place this week is the decision for the dates of the next meetings.
Okay, and any other news out of Rome these days, Alan?
Yeah, actually, there's Pope Francis, who has announced that Popes John Paul II and John the 23rd will be canonized on April the 27th of 2014. Now that's Divine Mercy Sunday, the Sunday after Easter. Now there's a wrinkle in this that's particularly interesting, and that's that John the 23rd is being canonized, made a saint, without the traditional second miracle. This is not unprecedented. The last person to do it was John the 23rd himself.
Interesting. Thanks very much, Alan. And here with me to discuss the latest on Pope Francis and news from the Vatican is Chris Lowney, author of Pope Francis, Why He Leads the Way He Leads, a book which will be released this Friday. We also have with us Father Christopher Pollard, who worked for the Holy See mission to the United Nations in New York. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Colleen.
Father Pollard, I'll start with you. So this Reform Summit, a lot of folks are saying this is a real sea change in the way that Pope Francis is approaching Curia reform. Is there any historical precedent for this, or is this truly something new?
Not that we know of. We would suppose that popes had, over the course of the years, pulled together their own close colleagues, whether they be over the phone and calling someone in another part of the world, or having their own private meetings. The lunches and dinners with Pope John Paul II were famous, and the conversations there were very important. But something like this we haven't seen before. And
what do you expect to see come out of a summit like this?
As Alan said, a date for another meeting. We know that the cardinals have already been meeting over the course of the summer, and that it's not as though their discussions begin now. Father Lombardi yesterday, the press secretary for the Holy See, explained that the cardinals had been working already with talking with each other, talking with local bishops, synods and councils of bishops, conferences as well, and that they've come up with 80 documents with proposals for the meetings to come.
Interesting. And Chris, you've written a book, well, you're yourself a former Jesuit seminarian who then went into the business world, and you've written a book on, which is forthcoming, on Pope Francis's leadership style, which you say is very much influenced by his Jesuit formation. What are some Jesuit characteristics we're seeing in the way that he's handling this reform process?
You know, I think, Colleen, we could even start with this idea of a council. Within the Jesuits, for example, almost every leader has to have a group of counselors that he has to consult with. He doesn't have to take their advice, just as the Pope is announcing. He's going to make his own decisions. But they have that tradition of gathering a group of people with whom you can test your ideas. You know, and from a business perspective also, there's something very wise about that. I mean, we live in a very complex world. It changes very quickly. It's very hard to sit in any one place and stay on top of what's happening everywhere. So, you know, I see a lot of wisdom from a business perspective, an organizational perspective in what he's doing, and it does very much feel of a piece with the Jesuit culture with which he would have grown up.
Well, another thing we've all been discussing this week is, of course, the interview with the Italian newspaper that came out, and Pope Francis was, in what we've come to expect, quite forthright and frank and pretty candid. He even mentioned, as Alan did, the leprosy on the papacy. He said when it comes to anti-clericalism, he can even feel a little anti-clerical when he experiences you know, priests or bishops who seem sort of more focused on themselves than serving the people of God. I mean, these are provocative comments. What do you make of how those comments fit into his overall reform vision?
Yeah, you know, one of the comments he made was the Curia is too Vatican-centric, you know, and I think it's ironic in a way that we're all kind of looking at Rome, we're looking at this council, we're looking at the Vatican, what'll happen with the Vatican Bank, whereas for me, a very, very key piece of what he's about is the energy has to be radiated out. I mean, it's not what goes on in Rome and the Vatican. We're a church that needs to be way more engaged. So that happens neighborhood by neighborhood, parish by parish, person by person. You know, a Jesuit in Argentina who was a seminarian under the Pope told me this great story that then Father Bergoglio was put in charge of a new parish. And he drafted a pile of seminarian volunteers. And what was their job? Walk the neighborhood. Go everywhere, meet every family. Don't just meet the people who come to church. Don't just meet the people who like us. He uses the phrase, don't comb the sheep. You know, we'd say don't skim the cream. So he says, when he says, you know, we can't be Vatican-centric, I think we really ought to look at the flip side of that is, what does it mean we must be? And I think it means we must be way more engaged at a local level, with those who are connected with the church, but also with those who feel alienated, feel hopeless, with whom we could share our message.
Interesting. And Father Pollard, so Francis has been getting a lot of praise in unexpected quarters. I saw on Twitter the other day Chris Rock calling him possibly the greatest man alive, Jane Fonda singing his praises. Meanwhile, a lot of rank-and-file Catholics, some of them are getting nervous. They're wondering, is he going to put life issues on the back burner? Are his comments in some of these interviews, you know, it suggests that there's some major shift coming, doctrinal shift. What do you say to those folks who are nervous about some of the comments?
Well, there should be peace and joy in knowing the faith. We know that the faith won't change. And even Pope Benedict in '06 made similar comments to the German press about how during his visits he would always be hammered on questions about abortion, contraception, and marriage, and how those questions wouldn't get to the heart of the matter. But it's the message of Jesus that makes it possible to come to those conclusions and to live that way of life. So it's very similar. It's just it's being said with a different accent.
Interesting. And Chris, any final thoughts about where you see this pontificate going in terms of how this will affect the ordinary Catholic in the pews, maybe a year or 5 years from now?
Yeah, I wouldn't be so bold as to make any kind of a prediction. But I guess my sense is that the Pope is somehow trying to ignite a real massive culture change here. And when I say that, two kinds of things come to my mind. One, the idea that there's a role for every individual Catholic to play here. Everybody has to be engaged, everybody has to be helping in the outreach. So that's one aspect of the change. And then, to me, another important cultural change he's really trying to implant is our identification with the poor. That we ourselves would be poor and simple and be powerful witnesses in a consumer world by virtue of how we're living, but also that we pay real special attention, as Jesus did, to those who are poor, who feel excluded, and so on.
Thank you. Chris Lowney, Father Christopher Pollard, thank you both for joining me.
Thank you.
We got to go to a break right now, but stay with us on EWTN News Nightly. We'll be right back. Welcome back to EWTN News Nightly. I'm Colleen Carroll Campbell. Tonight, in more than 270 cities across America and dozens more around the globe, thousands are standing vigil for the pro-life cause. They're part of a growing international movement of prayer, fasting, and outreach aimed at ending abortion. EWTN News Nightly's Jason Calvi reports on the 40 Days for Life campaign.
Cars cruising a main street in Manassas, Virginia see signs of life.
It's an opportunity for us to be a witness to these people, to show them that, hey, there's something in our community that needs to be brought to light, and that the fact is that people are dying, babies are dying here every week, 22 a week.
And more than 1,100 abortions last year.
Hail Mary, full of
So
grace.
people here are praying for 40 days from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m.
The most powerful thing we can do is pray.
It's not about confrontation, it's not about arguing, it's just allowing God to work through our prayers and peaceful witness to change hearts.
Local coordinator Mike Baldwin says they see about 5 or 6 changes of heart each campaign. 11-year-old Elena Morano witnessed one of those.
The thing that made her not have the abortion is that she felt so much peace and love.
The Morano family sought help for the mother at AAA Women for Choice, a pro-life crisis pregnancy center which is right next to the abortion clinic.
Every life saved is amazing,
The owner of the abortion clinic told me in her words she supports a woman's right to choose. She refused the request to an interview, but told me instead to contact the National Abortion Federation, which is located in this building behind me. They didn't respond to my request for an interview. Jason Calvi, EWTN News Nightly.
This fall's campaign of 40 Days for Life runs through November 3rd. I'm now joined by the co-founder and national director of the organization, David Bereit. Welcome, David.
It is so good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming, and tell our viewers how this began.
Well, believe it or not, 40 Days for Life literally began with 1 hour of prayer, and it was 4 of us just praying for an hour around an old wooden table, just asking God, show us what we can do to help end abortion in our community. And it was in a community in College Station, Texas. And during that hour of prayer, the time frame of 40 days really weighed on our hearts because of the spiritual significance of that time frame. And the 3 things were prayer and fasting, peaceful vigil, and community outreach. And so that launched the first 40 Days for Life campaign locally, and since then it has spread beyond our wildest imagination.
Right, so you started in 2004 locally in Texas.
Correct.
Then by 2007 you were going national. What are the results that you've seen?
We have seen more than 500,000 people participate in 40 Days for Life campaigns across 501 cities, all 50 American states, and now 21 other countries. And we have been in awe. We know of, from past campaigns, over 7,500 children whose lives have been spared from abortion. And just during the 40 Days for Life campaign we're in the middle of right now, that we just started, 49 babies have been spared from abortion. We've also seen 41 abortion clinics close following 40 Days for Life campaigns outside their doors. And we've seen 83 abortion workers, people like Abby Johnson, who have had conversions and completely left the abortion industry, thanking the people who are praying for them outside.
And you've seen these things happen during the time that 40 Days for Life is happening. Is that how you tally those results?
We do. We track what happens while the campaigns are going on, and that's when we track the lives saved. And then also we keep up with facilities that close. Many times it's after a 40 Days for Life campaign, and there are certainly other factors that can play into it as well. But when you have that many people praying and fasting for 40 days, that is certainly an answer to prayer when those facilities close down.
Right. Now, our reporter, Jason Calvi, saw response from national pro-choice groups and abortion rights groups, didn't get any. But I have seen, some talk out there from that side. One state group called this the 40 Days of Intolerance, saying that the goal is really to shame and intimidate women. How would you answer that?
Well, the first thing I would say is, how can prayer shame anyone? We are there to pray, and as you saw in that segment, to offer hope and help to those mothers. And there are over 7,500 mothers who appreciated and accepted the help that was offered to them. And that's one of the great blessings, to see people who are able to come back and introduce their baby to people who are out there praying and say, thanks to you, I didn't have the abortion. Thanks to you, this child is alive. So we really are there to help and not to hurt. And we really go out there to do everything we can to be a solution to the crisis of abortion, so everybody knows that they don't have to feel like abortion is their only choice.
Real quickly, what can someone do if they're not able to come out to the actual clinic and be part of that vigil?
Prayer is the most powerful thing we can do. With God, all things are possible, even ending abortion. So we invite people to pray. They can go to the 40daysforlife.com website and sign up to receive daily emails and devotionals and join with people around the world praying and working to end abortion.
David Bereit, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Colleen.
Finally tonight, angels have been enjoying a resurgence of popularity in recent years. On this Catholic feast of the guardian angels, we thought it would be interesting to find out what people believe about them. So EWTN News Nightly hit the streets. Here's what we found.
I definitely believe that there's angels watching over me. Yeah.
My guardian angel has protected me. I can remember when my knees were I had bad knees, and I pulled a root out of the tree, and I would have fallen right back on my back, but I just sort of went down real easy, and I turned around and I said, oh, thank you, because I probably would have broke something.
I believe that somebody, a family member or someone who believes in us that's passed away, that's watching over us.
I was a teenager, a wild teenager, and was traveling in the middle of the night, broke down out in the middle of nowhere, and a car comes up, and I do believe that that was my guardian angel.
The way we in American culture does things today, there's all different kinds of versions of what an angel really is. So mine is just a being, a spirit. It's not necessarily somebody with wings that flies around from here to there.
There's a lot of things that went on that I'm not supposed to be here. So I truly believe there are angels, that are assigned to us to protect us. I truly believe that.
Well, turns out a lot of folks believe in angels, but what does the Catholic Church teach? According to the Catechism, angels, unlike saints, are pure spirits. They have intelligence, will, and immortality. The Catechism says that Christ is the center of the angelic world, but the whole Church benefits from the mysterious and powerful assistance of angels. So don't forget to call on your guardian angel the next time you need a little extra heavenly help. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and visit EWTN's YouTube page, where you can catch our entire program again. I'm Colleen Carroll Campbell, and on behalf of all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.